And now for something completely different. Completely different. And now for something completely different.
Hello, this is C.T. Garrett with Mountain Way Kung Fu. I'm starting a video series called Demystifying Traditional Martial Arts. Now, as you can see, I'm in my traditional looking martial arts school. Some of you may be asking, well, what qualifies you to do this video? Well, I'm a multiple national champion, international champion. I was a very successful wrestler in high school. The only reason why I didn't wrestle in college is because I wanted to work more with classical style Asian martial arts systems. I've competed in MMA with success, meaning that I didn't lose any matches. I've had many students that have won championships, that have won many matches. We're probably 75% as far as win ratio to lose ratio. So we've been able to take what we would consider a classical martial art and be very successful in the mixed martial arts arena. Now, I bring that up because the debate that's going in the martial arts community right now is between mixed martial arts and traditional martial arts. Now, this is not a new argument. Ever since the first person probably smacks someone with a stick and then someone got a bigger stick and my stick's better than yours, the conversation's been going on for a long time, folks. So it's nothing new. But because classical or traditional martial arts, their heyday was a long time ago, and because, as it is taught here in the United States, a lot of it's taught to children, people are building these big mega schools, and so there's been a change or distancing from the classical approach to training for the purpose of combat as compared to what it is today as a way of maybe weight management, behavior modification for children, teaching discipline, and so on. Not to say that those do not have value, not to say that a kid learning to be focused, to do well in school, to be respectful is not a good thing. It's great. It's an awesome part of a person's development. But this debate has to do with whether traditional martial arts can be used effectively. Now, there's been a few personalities that are well known that basically say it's not possible, but yet, on the same vein, they will say, well, it's how you train. Okay, so what is it? Is it how you train or is it what you train with? That's never clear because most of these people that are making these statements are not traditional martial artists, or their experience with so-called traditional martial arts was in a school that was not really focused on self-defense and the training necessary to do that. One thing I'll say for sure, it's ugly. You want to train to fight, you got to fight. You want to train to be effective in combat, then you have to be willing to get punched, kicked, thrown, scratched, bruised, choked out, all kinds of things that most people do not want to experience 3 or 4 days a week. If you're sitting at a desk and you're a very respected person in the corporate world, you probably don't want to come to a martial arts school and have some person who's not at your level, so to speak, and that's how people would say it, and then be schooled and possibly humiliated. A lot of people don't have the humility to be able to go through that to make themselves combat ready and prepared for self-defense. So that's part of it. The other thing is the styles that comprise mixed martial arts. Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, and jiu-jitsu. At least 2 of those, very few people will do for recreational purposes because they're so competition oriented. And anything that is competition oriented will tend to draw the alphas in terms of physical acumen and physical disposition. People are very competitive, they have a natural aggression, they will tend to gravitate to these particular arts. And so, traditional martial arts, as it is today, can be done for recreational purposes. It can be done without competitiveness. It can be done primarily for health purposes. Those other arts, most people don't do boxing or kickboxing or wrestling for health reasons. They do it because they want to compete. They want to put themselves against other humans and dominate. And so you've got a different type of person doing these types of arts as opposed to the bigger population that may or may not be doing traditional martial arts. So that's part of what we're dealing with here, is a difference in just the type of people. And it's not to say that traditional martial arts can't work with those kinds of people, but it's an environmental issue. We have a very classical style system, classical style school. We don't have a whole lot of students. Why? Well, because you're not going to come here and necessarily be made to feel good about yourself because your punch is crappy, or your kick is crappy, or you're out of shape. You know, granted, we try to work our best with people at wherever stage that they're in, but the goal is to be able to use what you learn for self-defense if necessary. Now, Mountain Way is a fourfold system. There's the warrior, the healer, the scholar, the sage. So there's room for lots of different approaches. But if you're learning a warrior art, you should be able to defend yourself at least to some extent. Now, if you go up against a world-class kickboxer or boxer, and you're trained as a recreationalist, well, that's a world-class athlete versus someone who does it part-time. How could you even begin to compare that? That's like taking someone from the Little League and expecting them to be able to hit a ball that a major league pitcher's throwing. Well, it's not going to happen. This is recreation. This is professional. So when you're trying to compare the two, once again, it's kind of a weak argument. So that's my perspective. And so during this series, it's going to be about 10 episodes. I'm going to be covering some of the major points that are brought up by a lot of the modern martial arts practitioners, and say, well, traditional martial arts doesn't do this, so this doesn't make them effective. They don't do this, that doesn't make them effective. And basically, I'm going to shoot holes in these arguments because traditional martial arts does have this complete perspective. But once again, it's not necessarily the technique's not being there, it's how they're being trained and the intensity and the goal that you have. Do you want to be able to punch a person in his sternum and crack it? Do you want to be able to hit someone in the floater ribs and smash him? Do you want to be able to kick someone's shin and break it? Well, then there's a certain way you got to train to do that. Most people in traditional martial arts schools are not training to be able to do that these days. You go back in the 60s, it was different. But, you know, here it's 2016. It's a different world now. But it doesn't mean that that training didn't exist. And that's what we're going to be making very clear. And if anything, hopefully mixed martial artists and traditional martial artists can bridge that gap that's between them right now. And maybe they can borrow from each other in order to make each other stronger. Essentially, that's what we've done in our system. I can't say we've really borrowed from boxing or from Muay Thai, but it reminds us of how we need to train to be able to be effective. Now, granted, that's just what we do. There's really nothing we've had to change. If anything, when I've had students come to me and say, hey, I want to compete in mixed martial arts, what I did is alter their training and ramp the intensity up to a very high level, so that at the very least, they will never show up to a fight out of shape. They will never lose a fight because they weren't conditioned and ready for it mentally and in terms of their physical development. Now, not to say that we won every fight, but we won many fights where we just were mentally tougher than the other person, that they literally quit. They saw us cross the cage, you know, a little bit scratched, sweaty, but ready to go, ready to keep banging. And they're like, yeah, I don't think I want any of that. Bowed out before the next round even started. And that's because of the mental toughness from the training. And so that's what we're going to be covering. I hope you tune in each time we drop a new video. Now, one thing I will do is if you leave comments or questions, legitimate questions, not a bunch of just trash talking, but legitimate questions, then before the next episode gets dropped, I'll do my best to try to address it. And that way we can personalize it a little bit. We'll have our content that we need to cover, but if you have some legitimate questions, I'll do my best to respond on the video so that your question gets answered. Thank you.
Different.
Thanks.